Welcome to Vermont Artists and Authors, where we interview great storytellers and artists from the amazing Green Mountain State. I'm your host, Barney Smith of StoryComic.com, and we're excited to have with us the internationally acclaimed and best-selling Vermont author, Brandon Barrows. Brandon.
Thanks for having me, Barney. As you mentioned pre-recording here, you've tried to get me on, so you finally wore me down. But thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And just so we're clear, it was mostly because I only recently got a webcam. So I wasn't ducking you because of you.
Very, very excited to have you on here. As I said, that this has been, because I remember when I first met you, it was at one of those the Vermont book conventions, and you were, the thing that stuck out for me first and foremost was your pulp mystery novels seemed to like gravitate towards you.
Yeah, I did do comics for a long time, but my passion, like my reading passion, has always been mystery and crime fiction. And at some point, I just gravitated away from comics and started focusing entirely on prose. That was a long time ago at this point. And since then, I think I've had 9 novels and about 150 stories published. And the vast majority of those have been crime and mystery fiction.
As Venn diagrams go, what's the overarching theme that we would say for both of those?
Well, comic books, people think of superheroes, and that's the majority of American comics. But for decades, you could find virtually any genre of fiction that you could think of, everything from romance to sports to science fiction. But really, comic books as a whole grew out of the pulp magazine world. Most of the early comic book publishers were actually pulp magazine publishers. So they gravitated towards what they knew. A lot of the very early comics were kind of primitive because you had these like pulp romance or pulp mystery writers kind of just jotting down ideas in a very rough format. And then these publishers would go and they'd find an artist who maybe wasn't even familiar with comic books or the format, and they'd say, hey, make a comic out of this. So it kind of grew out of that, and they've been very intricately linked ever since. In fact, a lot of very early comics from the late 30s and early 40s were actually kind of half and half. You'd get this big 60 or 80 page magazine, and it might have 30 or 40 pages of comics and 30 or 40 pages of prose stories. And that kind of has come back a little bit. There's actually a magazine out there called Ahoy Comics that does the same thing, but that was the standard for a really long time. So those two things are kind of married to each other really intimately. And even the characters themselves, if you look at a character like Batman, originally he was not what you'd call a superhero. He was a masked detective along the lines of like the Shadow or the Green Hornet. He wore a costume for 2 purposes: to supposedly strike fear into the hearts of criminals, and to protect his identity, because, he was this rich, successful businessman, and he didn't want anybody to know that he was spending his nights running around rooftops. But ultimately, he was a detective. He did not have any special powers. He was solving crimes the same way the police did, without the restrictions placed upon them.
Can you share a little bit about what initially drew you to writing comics and mystery novels then?
Well, I grew up reading comic books. Some of my earliest memories actually involve comic books. So comics have always been with me. And I used to be a big reader of fantasy and science fiction when I was a kid. But one of the comics that I read was actually a mystery comic called Ms. Tree, about a female private eye. It was written by Max Allan Collins, who's a pretty famous mystery writer. And it's drawn by a friend of mine, Terry Beatty, who I've come to know through comics as well. And I don't know how old I was when I discovered this, but at some point I discovered that Max Allan Collins was not just a comic book writer, because at the time he was writing this and Batman and who knew what else. I discovered that he also wrote mystery novels, and I decided I wanted to give those a chance. Just because I liked the writer, and I had never really read much mystery or crime fiction. And even then, I still was mostly like a fantasy and science fiction guy. But I'll tell you, the older I get, the harder a time I have suspending my disbelief. in a lot of this fantasy and science fiction stuff. So I do prefer fiction that is grounded in reality. And when I started doing comics, um, one of the first major things I did was Jack Hammer. I've actually got my wall of Jack Hammer back there with all the artists who've worked on it over the years. Gave me headshots at various times. And I wanted to try and do something that was sort of on the edge of the world of superheroes, but was more along that mystery type stuff. So really, Jack McGriskin, the main character of the series, yes, technically he is super strong and a little bit less vulnerable than your average person, but really he's a private eye in a world where there are these superpowered guys, most of whom are far, far more powerful than he is, running around, and he's trying to navigate these mysteries while trying to deal with all this extraordinary stuff that he really considers more or less just an irritation. He doesn't want to have to deal with it, but there it is. That's the world he lives in.
Right.
So that was my first attempt to marry those two together, and basically it just went from there.
When it comes to actually putting together writing a mystery or crime drama, it's a lot of authors talk about how they are basically pantsers, where they're just going to just see where the story goes. But it seems like and this is just from me looking outside looking in, it would appear that if you're writing a crime or a mystery, there's a formula that you kind of have to stick to because you have to solve it at the end of the book. Am I wrong in saying that?
You were right when it comes to traditional mysteries. I can't think of the guy's name.
Okay.
I can't think of the guy's name, but there are the 7 laws of mystery fiction. The guy was actually an English vicar who started the first mystery fan club in the UK. And
Hmm.
he has these 7 rules, and they include things like there can't be any clues that are not visible to the protagonist as well as the reader. There can't be any hidden doors or trapdoors, things like that. There can't be or the detective cannot be the criminal. All these sort of things that you have in fair play type mysteries. So when you're talking about formulas and rules, if you are doing strictly fair play mysteries, that is absolutely true. More modern mysteries, there is a lot of stuff that you can do, and sometimes it's frustrating as a reader. Like the whole thing about the detective can't be the criminal. I have read several pieces that I found really interesting. I'm like, how are they going to solve this? And then it's kind of a disappointment at the end when it turns out that the detective is the one who's actually committed the crime, and this is all obfuscation. So I totally feel that. But a lot of mystery fiction, I find, if you're not strictly worried about the ins and outs and technicalities of the mystery, is more about the detective and his or her journey than it is about solving the mystery. A lot of mystery novels, when you really come down to it, they don't even have what you could consider a true mystery. Um, Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Detective fiction as a whole, originally the term just meant what we would call it would encompass both mystery fiction and crime fiction. So it's kind of like an overarching thing. And people are obsessed with genres, so that stuff has all been like sorted out and blah 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 blah. But you're right. If you're going to do an actual fair play mystery that the reader can solve along with you, there are rules that you have to follow. I will fully admit that I am not the best when it comes to constructing the mystery. And what I find works for me is I figure out what the solution is, and then I build backwards. I know a
Hmm.
lot of people have formulas, like you mentioned, where they just plug stuff in. And you might be able to get away with that for a couple books. But if you are someone who follows specific authors like I do, you very quickly pick up on the formula and it becomes kind of rote and disappointing.
Hmm.
So that's why I say that a lot of mystery fiction is less about the mystery than about the detective's journey, because to keep people coming back, you have to have something that they want to see the outcome of. They want to see what happens with these characters more, I think, a lot of times when it comes to series than they do with the actual mystery that's being solved in that individual volume. If you have an individual, like, one-off type book, that's a whole other thing. But maybe we're getting a little bit off track there. But to your original point, because I know I digressed, for true fair play mysteries, yes, there are rules and there probably are formula out there that you could follow. But I think the genre as a whole has expanded and matured over the last, 150 years since Edgar Allan Poe wrote the first true detective story. I think it's expanded to the point where those rules don't necessarily apply as much unless you want them to apply to your specific story.
Mm. Now, so how do you feel about, as an author, putting in inner monologue for your main protagonist?
A lot of my work is first person just because that's how I am most easily able to get into the mindset of the character. Um,
Mm.
that does limit you, but I almost like the challenge of that. So you've got this inner monologue with this character who's essentially talking to himself. He's talking this stuff out. And really, that's kind of me talking the problem out as I'm going through it, but it's also both me and the character talking directly to the reader. We're kind of figuring it out together. And you mentioned pantsers. That is absolutely me. I usually know how a book starts and have a pretty good idea of how it ends, and I have no idea how to get there until I start writing. Like right now I'm working on a novel. It's actually a novel I was hired to write from someone else's notes. Um, I was looking at this and I'm like, okay, we got a good setup here. So I wrote the first chapter, and then I went, I don't know how this person expects we're gonna hit the story beats that they want to hit. Let's just see what happens. So I just went for it, basically. Just whatever came out of my fingers came out of my fingers. And when I sent, the first 8 or 10,000 words I had written over, she was kind of like, "You're taking the story in a completely different direction than I imagined, but now I want to see what happens." So these are just the things that I want to make sure you get in there. Other than that, just go for it. So now I've got this fistful of notes that I don't know how useful they're even going to be, but I've got the first like fifth or sixth of a novel here, and the client is happy. So now let's see where we can go from there, as long as we get to that end that she wants to see. So that's kind of what pantsing is. Basically all my work has been pantsed. My second novel, it was a straight up mafia noir called Burn Me Out. That is the only book I have ever written that I used an outline. And I actually found the outlining process kind of painful because I'm one of those people that I have a story inside me, and then once it gets out, I want to move on to the next thing. And just writing the outline kind of felt like I'd told the story and I wanted to go do something else. But of course, the outline doesn't do me any good unless I go and then write the novel. So I kind of had to force myself to go back to it and do it. And I
Hmm.
will say, it was a very easy process writing the actual manuscript because I knew absolutely everything that would happen. But I took no joy in it because I knew everything that was going to happen. And it was more of a mechanical process than a creative one at that point.
Well, hey there. If you're enjoying our podcast, don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. Your support means the world to us and helps us keep this show going. We love hearing from you, so any feedback is welcome. And thank you for being a part of our podcast family and for all your support. It truly means a lot to us. Talk to us a little bit about your book that is, as of this recording, is on pre-order long before they die. Tell us about that one.
I actually have a copy of it right here. It's backwards,
Look at
but
that.
you can get an idea of the cover there. This is actually a revision of my very first novel. This is its 10th anniversary. It is a novel that it was my very first attempt at writing a novel. It took me way longer than I'd like to admit, but it did get out there in the world. There is a whole lot of drama with the publisher, blah, 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 blah. So I basically had in mind like 6, 7 years ago that as soon as I had the opportunity, I wanted to do a new edition, um, and basically retake control over it. So this is, I used to write a lot of horror fiction when I first started writing prose, just because that was the community that I had a lot of friends in. And I had some inroads into publishing markets. So this is basically California noir meets Lovecraftian cosmic horror. It is about a private eye named Tom Ahern, who is kind of your stereotypical, I don't want to say loser, but that's kind of what he is. He's just kind of a sad sack who hates his life and has never done anything to better himself or his life. He has an opportunity to make what he thinks is going to be some quick cash, taking on a client that he really doesn't want anything to do with, but who offered to pay cash up front. So he takes this job and he finds himself looped into this total underbelly of Los Angeles that he was only vaguely even aware existed, of drugs and hippies and the music scene and cosmic horror that underlies and sort of drives it all without most of the people involved in it knowing, because there are cosmic entities out there, as Lovecraft fans know, who want to merge our world with theirs. And here is Tom Ahern, 5'7", 135 pounds, between those people, those forces of darkness, and the rest of us. He is way over his head, but he makes it work by the end. I went ahead and I revised this. I won't say heavily. I would say like on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being a complete rewrite, it's like a 5. I cleaned up a lot of stuff that I didn't know better about at the time when I originally wrote it. And I made the storyline much cleaner, much tighter. So it's actually about 18,000 words shorter than the original novel, which was published under the title This Rough Old World. It is different enough that I felt that it deserved a new title. So the new title is Long Before They Die, which ties into the revelation at the end of the climax for anybody who's anticipating reading this. Well, there you go. There's This Rough Old World, way back when.
Yeah.
That is actually the second edition from the second publisher right there, back in 2017, after the original publisher went belly up. But yeah, so this is basically a cosmic horror / mystery in the vein of California noir, Lovecraftian cosmic horror, set in the psychedelic 60s. A lot of music stuff in there too for music fans out there, including some real life characters that kind of, or real life figures, excuse me, that wander through as characters.
Right. So let me ask you this question, Brandon. Is there, if you wrote a, say like the next book you write, you cover your name to say who it's from, and you give it to one of your readers, and you would say, "Guess who wrote this." Is there a specific Brandon Barrows-esque style or theme or something where they could say, "I think this is one of your books, Brandon. It has this flavor to it." What is your distinct theme or feel that people say that you have compared to
There
other
is,
authors?
and I did not realize this for years until someone pointed it out to me, and then someone else went, "Oh yeah, that's true." Most of my work revolves around broken families. Most of the main characters in my work are from either completely broken families, and they're kind of on their own and um, maybe struggling a little bit, or they are surrounded by these dysfunctional families that they are trying to navigate while they're dealing with all this other stuff. The ultimate expression of that is probably my novel, The Last Request, which came out a couple years ago from Bloodhound Books. It is set against the backdrop of a family reunion where this main character, who really hasn't seen any of her relatives since she was a kid because her parents were the black sheep of the family, she is trying, oh, there you go, you got it pulled right up there. She is trying to navigate all these family dynamics with these people that are essentially strangers to her while people are being murdered all around them.
Yeah, and so the last request. So Brandon, I gave you a review where I said Barrows masterfully builds tension, keeping you guessing until the very end. The characters are complex, each with their own hidden motives, making it a real whodunit. The isolated setting adds an extra layer of suspense, making you feel the character's desperation. In short, The Last Request is a compelling read that combines guilt, greed, and temptation into a high stakes game of survival. A must read for any fan of psychological thrillers. So,
Ooh, that is super high praise that I will try to live up to. Uh, that again, going back to your earlier point, The Last Request is probably my most conscious effort at following a true fair play mystery, uh,
okay.
so that the reader can follow along. I don't know that anybody, at least if they haven't told me. I don't know that anybody has actually solved the mystery before they got to the end. Um, but the clues are in there. If people are looking for them, you can find them and hopefully figure it out along with Holly.
Right. Now, talk because you mentioned mysteries and thrills have been around for 150 years. So, where do you see the evolution of the mystery novel?
I think we're going to see a lot more technological innovations. That's one of the things that I personally find hard to deal with, which is why a lot of my fiction is set in the 60s, 70s, 80s, is because we are all so connected now. I actually used to work with someone who went to go work as an assistant to an actual private investigator.
Hmm.
She was, his research assistant, which, I assumed would be a lot of legwork, a lot of interviewing people. She spent all her time online. She spent all her time doing all this research so that he could put together the pieces in his own investigations and then go do whatever he needed to do. That is a lot of crime solving, a lot of mystery solving these days. I mean, even the regular police do the same thing. A lot of large police departments have units that are completely devoted to doing basically online monitoring and research and so on and so forth. So I think what we'll see is we will probably see some writers who are trying to stick to the spirit of the more or less traditional mystery that find new ways to integrate technology into those works. But I think we will see a lot more fusion of science fiction and mysteries as well. I mean, there's always been some of that going back to the 60s and 70s. Um,
Hmm.
and it was the techno thriller became a big thing in the 80s and 90s, where all this new technology was coming out and people were eager to integrate it into their creative writing, and they kind of sometimes went overboard and turned it from the real stuff coming out into sci-fi. But that's okay, it's fiction, you can do whatever you want. I think we
Right.
will find a lot of people are either going to be in one camp trying to find realistic ways to depict the technology that actually exists, whether that be everybody's got a smartphone in their pocket that is GPS enabled. So in theory, anybody can find you at any time if they need to. Versus the other camp, they're going to take it to the next level and start integrating a lot more science fiction type stuff into what are otherwise more or less traditional mysteries. And like I said, that stuff is already out there, so I'm sure there's already a big fandom for that type of thing. And I can't imagine it'll get smaller as technology advances. So I think we'll
Right.
probably see an expansion of that.
And so I like to ask authors this question too. Is like, we are now, smack dab, as we're in the year 2025, AI is all over the place. As an author, what are your fears and excitements of AI?
Well, one of my fears has already come true. Three of my books, including The Last Request, were stolen by Meta to train their AI. I don't know if you saw that article in the Atlantic, but that was a big thing. And a number of other media outlets picked up on it. Meta, the company that owns Facebook and Instagram, literally stole tens of thousands of books from torrents to train their AI on. And somebody put together a search engine specifically for that, where you could search your own name. So I found some of my books. There is a class action lawsuit that's being put together. I contacted the law firm that is running with that as soon as I saw that to be added to it. So that's my worst fear already out there, is that somebody would steal my work and use it to train AI to essentially copy my style. As far as the good parts of AI, I honestly couldn't tell you. As far as a creative aspect goes, I don't think AI really has a part of it. I mean, AI is essentially soulless, regardless of how sophisticated the technology gets. And I have absolutely no interest in any sort of creative endeavor that does not have, some sort of spark of humanity in it. I mean, animals can create art if you want to call it that, whether it is, finger painting raccoon or whatever. But at least there's a living being behind it, even if it doesn't have that human creative spark. But AI has nothing at all behind it except, people who want to eliminate the human aspect because they essentially don't want to pay for it. Where I think AI could be useful is I think AI could be very helpful in targeting books and comics and music and things like that to specific audiences that may not be able to find them otherwise. Um, YouTube's algorithm is actually really, really good at that.
Mm,
At least in my experience, because I listen to a lot of music on YouTube just because a lot of record labels have put their entire catalogs up for streaming for free. And I have discovered a lot of music as YouTube learns what I like that I probably would never have discovered otherwise because, I know what record labels I like, for example, but, even a mid-sized record label that's been around 30, 40 years has probably released 10,000 albums. And I don't have time to go through them one by one and figure out which ones I like. But, the algorithm that YouTube uses goes, oh, hey, you like these three bands. You will probably like these three bands as well. And I would say
right.
probably four times out of five, it's correct. So if there was something like that that could help people more easily find the right audience for their books or comics or whatever, I think that would be great. I think that would probably be the best possible use of the technology as it exists.
Now, so Brandon, what's next for you?
What's next for me? Well, I'm going to finish writing this romance novel that I've been hired to write. And then after that, um, I'm not sure. I would love to start on another novel. I haven't had an idea since I finished my last one of my own. But I do have two books coming out. I have a mystery called The Darker the Night coming out in July of next year, 2026, from Rowan Publishing. And I just recently sold another mystery called The Devil You Know to Autonomous Press. I haven't set a date for that yet. I just turned in my final manuscript, so once I get the approval on that, we'll start talking about scheduling and all that stuff. But so I have at least two books coming out in the next 2 years or so.
And so Brandon, if people want to learn more about you, where's the best place they could go to?
They can go to my website, brandonbarrowscomics.com, a holdover from when I
Okay.
was primarily writing comics. You can also follow me on Blue Sky as just Brandon A. Barrows. Uh, I think all that stuff is linked on my website, but I'm
Okay.
on Twitter as well, but I'm not as active there just because their algorithm, speaking of AI, is jacked up, and I don't get a lot of interaction there anymore. But I'm pretty active on Blue Sky. Blue Sky has a great creative community for anybody who is not on there yet but wants to find
Okay.
new creators of all sorts.
Yeah, this is great. So Brandon, you're gonna have to come. You got to be regular here. You're gonna have to come on more. This was fun.
Oh yeah, it was great chatting with you. Yeah, I would love to come back next time. I've got something to chat about. I'd love to talk to you about it.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Brandon.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a lot of fun. It's been it's a nice change of pace. I haven't done anything like this in a while.